The message was sent while they were in the restaurant. I knew where they were, I knew what they were doing, and I knew they weren't expecting it. My hands were shaking as I pressed send. The message wasn't just angry words, it was a sharp blow, a cruel mirror that I would force them to face. They were so confident, so wrapped in the veil of their lies, that they probably thought they would never be found out. But at that moment, as the cursor blinked, I became the arbiter of their fate. The silence of the cell phone was deafening before I could imagine my lover's reaction to reading what I had written. Did he know that very night, I had already prepared everything? The letter to the lawyer, the documents that would start the divorce. Every word of that message was calculated. Not just to confront them, but to destroy the facade of security they had built up. I knew that the initial shock would be a mixture of fear and shame. But there was something else in store for them. Something I knew no one in that restaurant had expected. She had looked so stunning that night, I remembered it well. The blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The same one she said she would only wear for special occasions. He, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable, out of place, as if he knew that this place, expensive, elegant, full of prying eyes, wasn't where he really belonged. Perhaps that's why he chose that discreet corner. But even hidden, they couldn't escape the reach of my message. I hope dinner lives up to expectations, I typed. After all, it may be your last together. The divorce is already in the works and, of course, your wife won't be the only one to face the consequences. I imagined the look on her face when the phone vibrated. The relaxed smile freezing on her face as she read the words that shattered any shred of control she still believed she had. He probably leaned in curiously, thinking it might be something trivial. But when he read it, when he saw my name and understood the gravity of what was happening, the atmosphere in that restaurant certainly changed. The air must have become heavier. The laughter of other couples, the toasts with glasses of wine, everything must have disappeared as they stared at the chaos I had unleashed on them. I can still hear her voice in my head, trying to justify the unjustifiable when confronted. It was nothing, it means nothing, she would say. But not that night. That night, she had nowhere to run, no excuse ready to hide. Everything was in sight, and I had planned every detail. I was far away, but close enough to know the impact I was making. They knew I had proof. There was no disputing it. It wasn't just a suspicion or irrational jealousy. It was concrete. And now, public. As she looked at her lover, she surely realized that the man who had promised her adventures and mysteries couldn't protect her from the hurricane that was brewing. What do we do now? I heard his voice in my mind, probably whispered in desperation as he scrolled through the message again and again. A man who had as much to lose as she did. Or perhaps more. But the greatest irony of the night, the final blow that the two of them could never have predicted, was yet to come. My message, the one that put them against the wall, wasn't just sent to him. It was sent to someone who would change the course of that story in a way that neither they nor I could have imagined. As I finished writing, my breathing was heavy, my heart racing. The weight of betrayal was not just the pain of deceit, but the rawness of knowing that someone you loved was capable of destroying everything for something so fleeting. I felt the anger, the heartbreak, but above all, the emptiness. An emptiness that couldn't be filled with revenge or justice. Still, there was something in me that wanted to see it through to the end. That night, as I stared at the screen of my cell phone, I asked myself, how far can love endure pain? How far can betrayal push someone before all that remains is the desire to destroy what was once precious? I was about to find out. But there was one last question hammering at the back of my mind. Something I knew would only be answered when the night was over. What is more devastating, betrayal or its aftermath? Welcome to our channel. Here, we do not support and will never justify any kind of betrayal. All the stories you'll hear are fictional, created to show how betrayal can devastate lives, destroy relationships and leave irreparable scars. Get ready, because today's story is shocking, intense and full of twists and turns. Take a deep breath and be ready to feel the impact of every decision. Good story. They were the couple everyone admired. Lucas and Helena had built a life that, at first glance, seemed straight out of a modern fairy tale. Married for just over a decade, they shared moments of pure happiness, faced challenges like any couple, but always found a way to support each other. Lucas, a dedicated engineer, had worked hard to build a stable career, while Helena, an event manager, was the vibrant, creative soul who brought light to the home and the relationship. Together, they seemed to have found the perfect balance. The house they built reflected their love for each other. Located in a quiet neighborhood, it was full of details that showed Helena's touch: the hand-picked potted plants, the handmade curtains, the walls with photos of trips and unforgettable moments. Lucas liked to say that the house translated who they were, a mixture of stability and creativity, with firm roots but enough room for dreams. He loved his routine there, feeling that every corner of the house was a piece of the home they had built together. But, as in all stories involving real lives, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. There were silences that hung over the nights. Helena, once so enthusiastic about sharing details of the day, now often seemed distracted, caught up in thoughts she never verbalized. Lucas, on the other hand, was increasingly absorbed in his work, working overtime to secure a promotion that he believed would be the pinnacle of his career. However, these absences, both physical and emotional, were beginning to create a distance that neither of them knew how to bridge. The weeks went by, and small changes appeared. Helena's cell phone, which used to be left lying around the house, was now always nearby, often silently. Lucas noticed, but never mentioned it. He preferred to believe that it was just another of those moments when a couple's life required patience. He too was distant, dealing with tight deadlines and exhausting meetings that sapped his energy. On the rare occasions when the two of them had time for a longer conversation, it was interrupted by messages or phone calls that Helena hurriedly answered, leaving the room with banal excuses. Despite this, there was love. It wasn't the same vibrant love as at the beginning, but the kind that takes deep root, the kind that survives the ups and downs of everyday life. Lucas still looked at Helena with admiration, even when she seemed lost in another world. He remembered their first meetings, the way she made him laugh with absurd stories and the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about her work projects. He wanted to recapture that, but didn't know where to start. Helena, for her part, also felt the weight of distance. There was an emptiness that she couldn't explain. Lucas was a good man, of that she had no doubt. He had always been attentive, respectful and devoted. But something inside her seemed broken, a restlessness that she didn't know how to fix. Perhaps it was the routine. Maybe it was the feeling that something was missing, something she couldn't name. The days went by, each one bringing a new challenge for the couple. Lucas tried hard to keep everything on track, even if he could feel the tension in the air. He organized dinners, planned little surprises, but Helena seemed distant, as if something was pulling her away. It wasn't a direct rejection, it was more subtle, as if she was physically present but her mind was elsewhere. The couple's social life had also changed. Before, they used to go to parties and meet friends regularly. Now, Helena often declined invitations, saying she was tired or had something to do. Lucas sometimes went alone, other times he simply stayed at home, respecting the space she seemed to need. He began to feel that they were living parallel lives, rather than a shared one. One evening, while Lucas was working at his desk in the home office, he heard Helena on the phone in the next room. Her laugh was soft, almost like old times, but there was something different about it. He tried not to pay attention, believing it might be a friend or work colleague. However, that laugh resonated in his mind for longer than he would have liked. There was something there, something he couldn't identify, but which bothered him deeply. The following weekend, Lucas suggested a short trip, something for the two of them to relax and reconnect. Helena hesitated, saying she had commitments she couldn't postpone. He accepted, but disappointment showed on his face. She promised that they would find time soon, but for Lucas, promises began to ring hollow. Still, he didn't want to create a conflict. He preferred to wait, hoping that this phase would pass. That was how he justified everything, a phase. Couples go through difficult phases, don't they? That's what his friends, books and TV series said. He believed it. Or maybe he just wanted to believe it, because the alternative, that something more serious was wrong, was something he didn't want to face. Helena was also struggling with her own demons. She knew Lucas was a good man. She knew he deserved more than the distance she imposed. But the restlessness inside her grew every day. It was as if something was pulling her away, a force she didn't know how to resist. She wondered if she was being fair, if she was being cruel. But instead of facing these questions, she avoided them, burying them under excuses and justifications that, deep down, she knew were not enough. The days continued to pass, each carrying the promise that perhaps tomorrow things would be different. Lucas and Helena went about their routines, trapped in a silent dance of closeness and distance. The house that used to be full of laughter was now quieter, with short conversations and glances that avoided meeting for too long. But silence, although comfortable in its appearance, hides secrets. And soon, that fragile balance would be shattered, revealing truths that neither of them was ready to face. Lucas and Helena's routine continued to follow the same silent rhythm, but now there was a weight in the air that seemed inescapable. Lucas, increasingly attentive to the nuances of Helena's behavior, felt as if something was slipping through his fingers. There was a restlessness in him, a mixture of doubt and intuition, as if a silent warning was going off in his mind. He tried to rationalize, to think that perhaps he was exaggerating, but the small changes in Helena's behavior haunted him like shadows. That week, Helena had mentioned a work dinner. It wasn't out of the ordinary, considering her profession. She was always at events, planning and participating, but this time, something seemed different. The way she chose her dress, a new model that Lucas had never seen before, and how she took her time getting ready, with more care than usual, didn't go unnoticed. Lucas noticed the perfume she rarely wore, a fragrance he had bought himself years before and which she kept for special occasions. He tried to ignore the annoyance he felt when he saw her walk out of the door with a smile that seemed to contain something else. Lucas wasn't the type to investigate or invade other people's privacy. He had always believed that trust was the basis of everything. But that night, sitting on the sofa with the television on and his mind far away, he felt a nagging throb of doubt. Hours passed and Helena didn't hear from him. He sent a casual message, asking if everything was going well. The reply came later than he expected, a simple, "All great, see you later." That didn't comfort him. The feeling of unease stayed with him until the next morning. Helena returned late, after midnight, with a generic excuse about how dinner had been extended. Lucas, pretending to be indifferent, just mumbled something before turning over on the other side of the bed. Inside him, however, the questions were growing like a fire that he couldn't put out. Why did she seem so distant, even when she was by his side? Why did he feel that something essential between them had changed? Over the next few days, Lucas began to notice patterns. Helena seemed more anxious, always with her cell phone nearby, glancing at him as if waiting for something. She also went out more often, always with convincing explanations, but they never completely dispelled Lucas' doubts. He began to observe, not intentionally, but because his heart was pushing him to do so. It was as if his mind was putting together a puzzle with pieces he didn't even know existed. One afternoon, Lucas decided to leave work early. He didn't have a definite plan, he just wanted to do something different. When he got home, he noticed that Helena's car wasn't in the garage. He went inside, put his things in the kitchen and got a glass of water. As he drank, he saw something that caught his eye, a notification on the tablet she used to use. It wasn't like him to touch Helena's devices, but the name that appeared on the screen paralyzed him. It was a message from someone called Marcelo, someone he didn't recognize. Lucas left his glass in the sink and hesitated for a moment before picking up the tablet. The message was brief, but full of meaning. Dinner tonight? I can't stop thinking about you. He remained motionless, the sound of his heart beating loudly filling the silence of the house. That was all he needed to see to understand that his suspicions were not unfounded. That evening, Helena returned home with a casual smile. Lucas watched her in silence, noticing every gesture, every word. She once again mentioned dinner with colleagues, something that used to sound so normal, but now carried a completely different weight. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he decided to wait. He decided he needed something more before taking the next step. When Helena left, Lucas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He waited for a few minutes before leaving too, heading towards the restaurant she had mentioned. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he had to see for himself. When he arrived, he parked the car and watched the people going in and out of the place. He saw Helena. And he saw her with him. There she was, sitting at a corner table, laughing at something Marcelo was saying. His hand rested casually on the table, close to hers. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes to Lucas. He felt the floor open up under his feet. It was as if all the air around him had been sucked out, leaving him suffocated. He stood there in the car, staring, not knowing whether to get in or leave. He couldn't move for a while. His mind raced in all directions, revisiting memories from the past, trying to find signs that he might have overlooked. He thought about confronting them there, in front of everyone. But then a colder, more calculated thought took hold. He decided it wouldn't be an impulsive outburst. He needed to act more precisely. Back in his car, Lucas picked up his cell phone and wrote a message. It wasn't just any message. He chose his words carefully, knowing that they would have a devastating impact. When he pressed send, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Marcelo's cell phone vibrated on the table, and he picked it up, reading the message as his face went from confused to alarmed. Helena noticed the change and asked, "Is everything all right?" Marcelo didn't answer straight away, but handed her the phone to look at. The smile on her face disappeared instantly. Lucas, outside, watched as their expressions changed. He knew he had started something that couldn't be undone. Without entering the restaurant, Lucas started the car and drove off. But he knew that tonight would only be the start of something bigger. The silence that remained in the restaurant was only the prelude to the chaos that was about to be unleashed. Lucas knew the moment had come. For days, he had kept silent, allowing the weight of what he knew to hang over him like a constant shadow. Helena's betrayal was a fact he could no longer ignore, but there was something even greater, something he couldn't explain, an intuition that pushed him to dig deeper. The message he had sent to Helena's lover in the restaurant had only been the beginning. Now, he needed answers. He waited for a night when Helena was out of the house again, claiming yet another work commitment. This time, he didn't follow her, but stayed at home, examining every detail that might reveal something more. Helena's tablet was still on the table, and he decided to open the messages. It wasn't just curiosity, it was necessity. He needed to understand what had led to the breakup of everything they had built together. The messages between Helena and Marcelo revealed more than Lucas had expected. They were filled with a tone of complicity, something that went beyond a passing affair. There were references to meetings, trips and, above all, mentions of an opportunity that they needed to seize before it was too late. Lucas didn't know what it meant, but he felt it was significant. He took photos of the conversations and saved them. Now he had to confront her. When Helena arrived home, Lucas was waiting in the living room. She tried to walk straight past, but he called her name firmly. "We need to talk." The seriousness in his voice made her stop. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down, but avoided facing him. "What now, Lucas?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice carried a slight tremor. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I know about you and Marcelo," he began, his voice controlled but laden with a palpable pain. Helena froze, her gaze finally meeting his. The expression of surprise quickly gave way to a mixture of shame and anger. "Lucas, it's not what you think," she began, but he held up his hand to interrupt her. "Then tell me what it is. Because what I see is my wife lying, hiding, and finding someone else while I'm here, trying to understand where we got lost." Helena remained silent, her words stuck in her throat. Lucas continued. "I saw you at the restaurant. I sent you that message. I know you're cheating on me. But there's something else, isn't there? Something you're hiding." She looked away, her restless fingers tightening the hem of her dress. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Lucas leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "Helena, don't treat me like an idiot. The messages between you speak of an opportunity. What does that mean? What are you up to with him?" Helena finally raised her eyes, and there was something in them that Lucas didn't recognize. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. "Lucas, you don't understand. It's not that simple," she said, her voice wavering. "Then make me understand," he insisted, his patience waning. "You owe it to me." Helena took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "Marcelo and we are involved in something. Something that started out as a plan, but things got out of hand." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "A plan? What kind of plan?" She hesitated again, before finally admitting it. "Marcelo is a scammer. And I got involved in it for a reason that, at the time, seemed justifiable. We were trying to get access to your financial information." Her words dropped like a bombshell. Lucas leaned back on the sofa, anger mixing with incredulity. "You're telling me that not only did you betray me, but you also tried to steal from me? My God, Helena, what's happened to you?" She started to cry, but he didn't move. "Lucas, I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what I was thinking. Marcelo, he manipulated me. He knew how to make it seem like it was something worthwhile." "Manipulated? Or did you choose this because you thought he was your way out, your chance to escape a life you thought was dull?" Lucas's words were sharp, and she cringed. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I thought I was doing it for us, but deep down, I know it was selfish. I was dissatisfied, and he took advantage of that." Lucas shook his head, trying to take it all in. "And what else? What did you have planned?" "I want the truth, Helena. The whole truth." She hesitated, but knew she had no choice. "Marcelo wanted access to your company, to your accounts. He said it would be quick, that you'd never notice. But I couldn't go through with it. I stopped before he could do anything." Lucas laughed, but there was no humor in his laugh. "Do you want me to thank you for not stealing me all the way? Is that what you expect from me now?" "I just want you to understand that I know I made a mistake," she pleaded, her tears falling freely. "I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I was lost, Lucas. Lost and vulnerable." He was silent for a long time, his emotions struggling to find a way out. Finally, he stood up. "I need some time to think. This is too much to process right now." Helena tried to hold his hand, but he pushed her away. "Lucas, please don't give up on me. On us." He looked at her, his gaze full of sadness. "You gave up on us first, Helena." Lucas drove off, leaving her alone with her tears and regrets. As he drove, his mind was in a whirl. He knew that this was only the beginning. What else could be hidden? Her betrayal and secret were a hard blow, but he felt that the full impact was yet to come. Lucas drove aimlessly for hours, trying to find a shred of clarity amidst the storm that now occupied his mind. Helena's confession was not only a romantic betrayal, but also a betrayal of the trust he had believed to be unshakable between them. Every kilometer he traveled felt like a step towards the abyss that now existed in his life. He felt the anger growing, but above all, he felt the emptiness. How could someone he loved so much have become a stranger? Eventually, he stopped at a small cafe on the side of a deserted road. The place was almost empty, except for a sleepy attendant and a couple in a far corner. Lucas sat down at a table near the window, ordering a coffee he knew he wouldn't drink. He needed to think, but his mind was flooded with images and words, a whirlwind that wouldn't leave him alone. As he stared at the steaming cup, his phone vibrated. He picked it up and saw a message from an unknown number. The message was short and to the point: "Can we talk? I need to explain." He knew who it was, but ignored it. He wasn't ready to hear any more excuses or explanations. Not yet. After a while, he got back into his car and drove home. When he arrived, he found Helena sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She raised her head when she saw him enter, but said nothing. The silence between them was almost deafening, as heavy as a cloud about to collapse. Lucas walked straight past, up the stairs towards the bedroom. He needed space, he needed air. The next morning, while Helena was still asleep, Lucas did something he never imagined he would do. He hired a private detective. The sense of doubt and mistrust was like a poison, and he needed answers that Helena didn't seem willing to give him. He knew that Marcelo was the key to understanding everything. Who was this man? What did he really want? Days passed and Lucas kept his distance. He avoided prolonged discussions and dialogues with Helena, limiting himself to functional interactions. Helena tried to get closer, but each attempt was met with coldness. She knew she had broken something that might never be fixed, but she didn't know how to change it. The detective was quick to bring her information. Marcelo wasn't just a casual lover, he was known for getting involved with women in stable relationships, always with the aim of manipulating and gaining financial advantages. His reputation was shady, and his ability to win people's trust was frightening. More than that, the detective revealed that Marcelo was involved in a larger scheme, something that involved sophisticated financial fraud. Lucas listened carefully to every word of the report, feeling a chill run down his spine. Marcelo was more dangerous than he had imagined. He knew he had to confront Helena again, but this time armed with everything he had discovered. That night, he called her to talk. Unlike the other times, there was a firmness in his voice that made her realize she couldn't run away from this conversation. "Helena, I need to know the truth." "The whole truth, with no omissions," he began, looking her straight in the eye. "I've already told you everything," she replied, but her voice betrayed her insecurity. "No, you haven't," he retorted, placing the detective's report on the table between them. "Marcelo isn't just a lover. He's a manipulator, a criminal. And you knew it." Helena stared at the report, her eyes wide. "Lucas, I didn't know until I was already too involved. Sending money, suspicious transactions. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" he asked, his voice laden with a mixture of disappointment and anger. "How much were you willing to lose before you realized what you were doing?" Helena collapsed on the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "I don't know. I don't know how I let things get to this point. He made me believe it was something harmless." "Harmless? Stealing my money, cheating on your family, destroying everything we've built together. Does that seem harmless to you?" Lucas asked, his voice rising slightly. "I was confused, Lucas. I felt lost. He showed up at just the right moment, telling me everything I wanted to hear," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you did," he replied, the coldness in his voice cutting. "And it wasn't just because of the affair. It was because you chose to deceive me in every possible way." Helena began to cry, but Lucas didn't move. He couldn't offer consolation. "Not now. I broke up with him," she said between sobs. I stopped before he could go any further. There were no transactions, Lucas. He tried, but I wouldn't let him. Lucas remained silent, processing what she had said. But the anger and pain were still greater than any attempt at understanding. That doesn't erase what you did, he finally said. And it doesn't change the fact that you chose to betray the person who has always been by your side. Helena tried to move closer, but he held up a hand, stopping her. Don't touch me, Helena. I need time to decide what to do next. She watched him as he left the room, feeling that the gulf between them had never been greater. Lucas knew that there was still a lot to be resolved. Marcelo was somewhere out there, and his shadow loomed over everything. But he also knew that, whatever happened, his life would never be the same again. Lucas spent the next few days in a kind of emotional limbo. The discovery of everything, the affair, the scam, the lies, left him trapped in an endless cycle of conflicting thoughts and feelings. He wondered if he could have done anything differently to prevent them from getting to that point. More than that, he wondered if there was anything left between him and Helena that could be salvaged. Helena tried to regain some level of normality, but each attempt was permeated by uncomfortable silences and mechanical gestures. She avoided asking where Lucas was when he went out or what he was thinking when he sat in silence for hours in front of the window looking lost. Every attempt at conversation she made was met with short, almost automatic responses. The distance between them seemed like an insurmountable chasm. One afternoon, Lucas received a call from the private detective. There was one more piece to the puzzle. Marcelo had been tracked down but, surprisingly, he didn't seem to be on the run. He was staying in a hotel, still in the same city, as if he was in no hurry to disappear. This intrigued Lucas. Why would someone who was clearly exposed remain so close? The detective suggested it was a show of power or contempt for the consequences, but Lucas had another theory. Marcelo wasn't just a manipulator, he was someone who played with his victims' psyches. Staying there was a deliberate act to maintain control over Helena, and perhaps even over him. Lucas decided it was time to confront Marcelo directly. He had no concrete plan, just the need to confront the man who had invaded his life and manipulated the woman he loved, or at least thought he still loved. On the way to the hotel, his mind was a whirlwind. He rehearsed possible dialogues, but none seemed sufficient to express everything he was feeling. When he arrived at the hotel, Lucas gave Marcelo's room number at reception. The clerk hesitated, but he showed a tone of authority that made her give in. She went up the elevator with her heart racing, trying to control the anger that threatened to overflow. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath before knocking. The sound of footsteps on the other side was like a trigger, the tension in her body rose to its limit. Marcelo opened the door with an expression of restrained surprise. It was clear that he had been waiting for this moment. Lucas entered without asking permission, closing the door behind him with a firm gesture. The room was simple but organized, with an open folder on the table that immediately caught his eye. "I was wondering when you were coming," said Marcelo, with a smile that irritated Lucas even more. "Have a seat. Let's talk like civilized men." Lucas stood, his fists clenched at his sides. "You know why I'm here. So stop playing the funny man and say what you want." Marcelo tilted his head, analyzing Lucas as if he were looking at an intriguing puzzle. "I already got what I wanted, Lucas. The rest is up to you and Helena." "Did you get what you wanted?" Lucas repeated, his voice full of incredulity. "You destroyed my marriage, tried to steal me away, and now you're acting like it's a game." Marcelo shrugged. "Everything is a game, in the end. I just play better than most." Lucas took a step forward, anger threatening to overwhelm him. "You've ruined my life." "No, Lucas," Marcelo replied, his tone firm. "I didn't ruin anything. Your life was falling apart long before I came along. I just accelerated the process." Lucas felt his blood boil, but he knew that giving in to his anger would get him nowhere. He needed answers, and he needed them now. What are you still doing here? Why didn't you run away when you had the chance? Marcelo smiled again, this time with disturbing calm. Because I wanted to see how it would end. I wanted to see how far you and Helena could go to save something that, frankly, was already dead. Those words hit Lucas like a punch. He forced himself to remain calm, but he couldn't completely hide the impact. You don't know anything about us. I know more than you think, replied Marcelo, his voice now lower, almost compassionate. Helena told me everything. The lonely nights. The feeling of invisibility. You were so busy trying to be the perfect husband that you forgot to be, yourself. Lucas felt a tightness in his chest. He knew there was truth in Marcelo's words, but he hated to admit it. That doesn't justify what she did. Or what you did. I'm not here to justify anything, said Marcelo. But maybe you should. Maybe you should ask yourself why things have come to this. Lucas didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at Marcelo, trying to decide whether it was worth continuing the conversation. Finally, he turned to leave, but not before saying, if you ever get close to Helena again, I swear I won't have the same patience. Marcelo laughed quietly. I don't need to get close. The damage is already done. Back home, Lucas felt exhausted. The confrontation with Marcelo hadn't brought him the sense of justice or relief he'd hoped for. Instead, it had left even more questions in his mind. He knew that the next step would be to confront Helena again, but this time he needed to understand his own feelings before facing her. Helena was in the kitchen when he arrived. She looked at him, guilt evident in her eyes. Lucas didn't say anything straight away. He just sat at the table, staring at her in silence for a moment before finally speaking. I went to see Marcelo. Helena remained motionless, her expression freezing. And, what did he say? He said you told me everything, Lucas replied. But he was wrong, wasn't he? Because you're still hiding something from me. Helena lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. Lucas, I don't know how to explain it. Then tell me, he insisted, his voice firm. Because if you don't, I don't see how we can even begin to resolve this. Helena took a deep breath, as if trying to gather her courage. Marcelo made me believe that what he wanted was just money. But it wasn't just that. He wanted to destroy me. He wanted to destroy you. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Why? Because he used me to get to you. You don't remember him, but he remembers you. He lost everything because of a decision you made years ago. Lucas felt the air escape from his lungs. What are you talking about? Marcelo was one of the minority partners in that company you helped close down, Helena explained, her voice almost inaudible. He lost everything, Lucas. And he wanted revenge. Helena's words reverberated in Lucas' mind. Suddenly, it all made sense, the manipulations, the psychological game, Marcelo's silent hatred. It was more than betrayal. It was personal. Lucas sat in silence for a long time, processing everything. Finally, he stood up. I need time, he said, before leaving the room. He knew that the end of the story was near, but he still didn't know what it would be like. The moral dilemma he faced was overwhelming, how to deal with what Helena had done and, at the same time, protect himself from the past that was now coming back to haunt him. Lucas spent weeks reflecting on everything he had discovered. Helena's confession, Marcelo's manipulation, and the devastating impact it all had on his life. Every piece of that story felt like another blow to something he no longer knew if he could repair. He oscillated between anger, disgust and a sadness that seemed to eat away at him, but above all, he knew he had to find a way to move on, with or without Helena. One morning, Lucas received an unexpected call from the lawyer he had hired to deal with the legal aspects of the case. Marcelo had been arrested red-handed while trying to pull off a financial scam on another victim. The authorities had traced his activities and connected his previous extortion attempt to Helena and Lucas. This brought unexpected relief, but also raised a new dilemma. Lucas would be called to testify and would have to relive all the pain in public. He shared the news with Helena that evening. She was sitting in the living room, her gaze lost in a book she clearly wasn't reading. When he mentioned Marcelo's arrest, she just closed her eyes, as if trying to process the enormity of it all. "That doesn't change what I did," she said at last. Her voice was hoarse, heavy. "I left you. I left both of us." "Yes," Lucas replied, his voice firm but not cruel, "and now we have to deal with the consequences." In the days that followed, Lucas began to make decisions. He started divorce proceedings, which Helena accepted without resistance. There was no more room for reconciliation. The damage was irreparable. For her, separation was the fair price for her choices; for him, it was the only way to rebuild something that made sense. As the process continued, Lucas began to notice something new in himself, a lightness he hadn't felt for a long time. He began to allow himself small pleasures again, a walk at sunset, a coffee with a friend, even a new book that captivated him more than he expected. He was relearning how to live, and although the emptiness was still there was also a thread of hope. Helena, for her part, faced the consequences of her betrayal silently. She quit her job, feeling that the weight of her reputation was unsustainable, and moved into a small apartment. Every corner of the new space seemed to remind her of what she had lost, but she knew it was the only way forward. She started going to therapy, something she would never have considered before, and slowly began to face the deep reasons for her choices. It wasn't easy, and she often felt on the verge of giving up, but there was something inside her that insisted on continuing. A few months later, Lucas received an invitation to a charity event. He hesitated, but eventually decided to go. It was an important step towards reconnecting with the world. During the event, he met Clara, a journalist who was covering the occasion. The meeting was unexpected, but there was something about her, the simplicity in the way she spoke, the way her eyes seemed to see beyond words, that intrigued him. They talked for hours that evening, exchanging stories about work, travel and the small details of their lives. Lucas didn't mention Helena or Marcelo, and Clara didn't ask. It was a light, uncomplicated conversation, something he hadn't experienced for a long time. Over time, Lucas and Clara began to see each other more often. He wasn't looking for a new relationship, but the connection he felt with her was undeniable. Clara didn't fill the void that Helena had left, but she helped Lucas realize that emptiness didn't have to define him. He was rebuilding himself, piece by piece. Helena, in another corner of the city, continued her healing process. She knew she would never get Lucas back, but she began to understand that her journey didn't depend on him. She rediscovered an old passion for writing and started working as a freelancer, rediscovering parts of herself that she had put aside for years. It was a slow process, but for the first time she felt she was on the right track. As for Marcelo, he was facing a long trial. His victims were many, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. His unshakable confidence had disappeared, replaced by a somber silence. He was now just another man facing the consequences of his choices. Lucas finally felt that he had reached the end of that chapter of his life. He didn't have all the answers, and the scars were still there, but he had learned that suffering didn't have to be the end. He had found a new perspective, a new beginning. And now, it's your turn. What did you think of this story? Leave a comment, share your opinion and tell us what caught your attention the most. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, full of emotions, twists and lessons. Here, we always make it clear, we do not support or justify any kind of betrayal. Let this story serve as a reminder of the devastating impact that disloyalty can have. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.